more than 500 years before the Battle of Hastings, even before France or Spain became unified nations. A conflict had already begun to smolder on the Iberian Peninsula. A never-ending war between two faiths, two civilizations, two worldviews. It was the clash between Islam and Christianity, a religious and cultural rift that would run through the entire history of medieval Europe. In the early 8th century, Arab and Berber armies, marching under the banner of Islam, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and swept away the Christian kingdoms of Iberia. They established the kingdom of Al-Andalus, a dazzling civilization with cities like Córdoba, Seville, and Granada. Yet in the north, small Christian kingdoms remained unconquered, and from there, a centuries-long journey called the Reconquista, the reconquest, began. Over hundreds of years blood was shed and faith burned fiercely. And on a July morning, in the year 1212, in a valley called Las Navas de Tolosa, the two forces finally faced each other in one of the most decisive battles of the Middle Ages. Since the year 711, when Muslim forces first set foot on the Iberian Peninsula, the entire land fell into their hands almost completely within just a few short years. Only a few remote mountain ranges in the north remained, where surviving, Christians established small kingdoms such as Asturias, Leon, Castile, Aragon, and Navarre. From lonely fortresses deep in the mountains, they did not surrender. On the contrary, they began a long resistance, a struggle that would last nearly 800 years, known as the Reconquista, meaning the reconquest. Under King Alfonso III, Leon expanded its territory southward. Castile, originally just a small county, gradually became the military heart of the Reconquista. Aragon and Navarre also asserted their roles step by step, but this was not merely a war for land, it was a battle for faith. In the south, the Muslims were not just invaders, they had become native inhabitants, building a unique culture rich in architecture, music, and science. During the era of the Caliphate of Córdoba, Muslim Iberia reached a golden age, dazzling the Christian world to the north with both admiration and fear. However, in the 11th century, the Caliphate of Córdoba collapsed. Smaller Muslim states, known as taifas, emerged, competing for power and gradually weakening. Seizing the opportunity, the northern Christian kingdoms accelerated the Reconquista, but they too were not free from internal divisions, fighting over territory and at times undermining each other. By the end of the 12th century, just as the Christians began dreaming of complete victory, a new Muslim power, strong, austere, and fanatical, emerged from beyond the Sahara Desert, the Almohad Empire. Just when the Christians thought the Reconquista was nearing its end, a vast shadow from the south once again fell upon the Iberian Peninsula. It was the Almohad Empire, warriors from the Atlas Mountains of North Africa, carrying with them a rigid, uncompromising, and revolutionary religious ideology. The Almohad Empire emerged in the mid-12th century, replacing the Almoravids. But they were not merely conquerors, they were radical religious reformers who believed that Islam had become corrupted and needed purification. With unwavering conviction, they conquered both North Africa and Al-Andalus. In 1195, Caliph Yaqub al-Mansur, the Almohad ruler before Al-Nasir, achieved a major victory over the Christian coalition at the Battle of Al-Andalus. It was a devastating blow that shook the Christian kingdoms of the north. After Al-Mansur's death, his son Muhammad Al-Nasir ascended the throne in 1199. The young caliph, known across Christendom as Mir al-Mamolin, meaning commander of the faithful, harbored ambitions even greater than those of his father. Al-Nasir quickly suppressed internal unrest, consolidated power, and began mustering his forces. In 1211 he personally crossed the sea, leading a massive army from North Africa into Iberia, with a sacred mission to crush the Reconquista, obliterate the Christian kingdoms, and turn the entire peninsula into Dar al-Islam, the land of Islam. Al-Nasir made no attempt to hide his intentions. He sent threatening letters to the Christian kings, demanding their submission. When they refused, he declared war, not just on Castile, but on the Roman Church and the whole Christian world. A storm was approaching, and the Christians, long divided, would soon face a stark choice: unite or be consumed. Alfonso VIII, King of Castile, was not a brilliant warrior, but he clearly understood the danger looming on the horizon. The humiliating defeat at the hands of the Almohads at Alarcos in 1195 still lingered in his memory. He knew that, if he did not act in time, his kingdom, and the entire Christian presence in Iberia, could be wiped out. Facing the threat posed by Caliph Al-Nasir, Alfonso VIII did something unprecedented. He sent letters pleading for help to neighboring Christian kingdoms, even to age-old rivals like King Pedro II of Aragon and Sancho VII of Navarre. He also dispatched envoys all the way to Rome, begging the Pope to support a crusade on Iberian soil. Pope Innocent III, one of the most powerful popes in history, gave his blessing. He issued a crusading bull granting full indulgence to those who would take up arms against the Muslims in Iberia, and thus Las Navas de Tolosa became a true crusade, no less solemn than the campaigns once launched toward the Holy Land. For the first time in generations, the Christian kings of Iberia set aside their rivalries to fight as one. King Alfonso VIII of Castile, Pedro II of Aragon, and Sancho VII of Navarre, along with thousands of knights, soldiers, monks, and military orders, gathered under a single banner. They were not just defenders of the faith, they were men gambling everything. If they failed, it would not only mean the fall of their kingdoms, but the potential annihilation of Christian civilization on the Iberian Peninsula. And so, in the summer of 1212, a force unlike any seen before, vast, resolute, and zealous, began marching southward, heading toward the Sierra Morena Mountains, where Caliph Al-Nasir awaited them with an equally formidable army. As the Christian coalition army advanced southward, they knew the final battle would unfold in the mountains, where Caliph Al-Nasir had prepared a deadly trap. In the Sierra Morena range, the only route to the heart of Muslim territory had been blocked. Al-Nasir wisely avoided a direct confrontation. Instead, he positioned his forces to guard the treacherous mountain passes, cutting off every path and forcing his enemies into a deadly dilemma. Nature became his most fearsome ally: deep ravines, mist-shrouded peaks, and narrow trails where death awaited at every turn. In the midst of despair, as the commanders debated retreat, a mysterious man appeared, a local shepherd named Martin al-Hajar. He claimed to know a secret route through the mountains, an old and rarely used passage called the Puerto del Rey. With few options left, the Christian kings decided to gamble the fate of the entire campaign on the shepherd's guidance. As night fell under the pale moonlight, tens of thousands of soldiers silently moved along the perilous paths, with steep cliffs on one side and deathly silence on the other. A miracle occurred. Before dawn, the entire army, including infantry, cavalry, supply carts, and crusader knights, had successfully crossed the mountains. They emerged behind the Almohad lines, taking Al-Nasir by complete surprise and throwing his forces into panic. A path once thought impassable became the road to victory. A reckless decision became a stroke of strategic genius. Before them now stretched a wide plain where Caliph Al-Nasir and his massive army had encamped. There was no turning back. The battle for survival was imminent, and only one side would leave that field alive. July the 16th, 1212. The sun had yet to rise high, but the sound of war drums, battle cries, and thundering hooves had already shattered the dawn. On the fields near Las Navas de Tolosa, two worlds prepared to collide in a clash for survival. To the north stood the Christian coalition, over 60,000 troops from Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and many knights from other parts of Europe. They were divided into three divisions: the centre under Alfonso VIII, the left flank commanded by Pedro II of Aragon, and the right led by Sancho VII of Navarre, known as Sancho the Strong. To the south, Caliph Al-Nasir commanded a force, no less formidable, estimated at over 100,000 men, including elite troops from North Africa, Andalusian infantry, and heavily armoured cavalry arranged in deep, tight formations. The Almohad army formed a solid defensive line, with the command camp fortified behind chains of iron and protected by elite bodyguards. The battle erupted with fury. The Christian cavalry launched direct assaults, only to be repelled by the disciplined Almohad ranks. Arrows rained down like a storm. Spears shattered. Blood ran in streams. The flat terrain became a chaotic battlefield engulfed in dust and smoke. For hours, both sides struggled in a brutal deadlock. The advantage seemed to lie with the Muslim forces, with their secure defensive lines, skilled archers, and early control of the battlefield. But the Christian coalition held their ground. They knew that if they lost here, they would lose everything. The turning point came when Sancho VII led his Navarrese troops in a daring charge straight into the heart of the enemy lines. Despite iron barricades and elite guards, he and his knights broke through the defences and struck directly at the tent of Caliph Al-Nasir. Legend tells of Navarrese soldiers storming past chains of iron, fighting like wild beasts. The image of knights, red crosses emblazoned on their armour, blazing through the enemy camp like a storm of fire, became immortal. That decisive blow shattered the Almohad formation. Caliph Al-Nasir, surrounded and panicked, fled the battlefield. His army, demoralized and leaderless, quickly disintegrated. What began as a brutal confrontation ended in the chaotic rout of a force that once made all of Europe tremble. Las Navas de Tolosa was more than a victory. It was a seismic blow that shattered Muslim dominance in Spain. It marked the high tide of the Christian Reconquista and remains an indelible memory in the minds of both Christians and Muslims alike. The victory at Las Navas de Tolosa did not merely end a battle, it marked the end of an entire era. The Almohad Empire, once a mighty force stretching from North Africa to the Iberian Peninsula, began to collapse. Internal strife, local uprisings, and the retreat from northern strongholds ensured they would never recover. For the Christian kingdoms, the gates had been thrown open. Within just a few decades, Castile, Aragon, and Leon launched large-scale campaigns of conquest. Córdoba, the magnificent Islamic capital, fell in 1236. Seville, the jewel of Andalusia, was captured by Castile in 1248. Las Navas de Tolosa became an irreversible turning point in the Reconquista, the 8-century-long effort to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula, and more than just a battle, it was etched into the memory of generations as a symbol of courage, unity, and unyielding resolve. In the very place once soaked in blood and fire, churches were built, monuments erected, and the story of those who changed the fate of an entire land was passed down.